So my name is Stefan Henningsson, and I'm a professor here at Copenhagen Business School in Denmark. I'm responsible for our concentration in digitalization in our executive MBA program. I was responsible for some of our undergraduate educations. I have a background in IT management and digitalization as my professorship. So I sit in committees such as the Danish IT Association's Council for IT Strategy and engage with local communities in digitalization topics. So when we think about digitalization, I think it's important to know that this is a trend, the continuation of a trend that's been ongoing for quite some while. So, yes, it changed in nature, and yes, it accelerated, but since the 70s and 80s, we have applied digital technologies in corporations. And what has happened is, of course, that every year we sort of accelerate the permeation of digital technology. So now almost every aspect of a business is in some way related to digital technologies. When it started with back office functions, it continued to customer channels, and now it's digital assets and digital products and digital services that are really prominent. So this means that, so there are two sort of things happening in parallel. One is that we get more of digital, we get more of IT and various digital components, but also that the nature of digitalization, the nature of those technologies, what they do for us has changed. So it used to be that digital technology, IT classical, used to be supporting, or in best case, supporting and enabling business operations. Now we have value propositions that fundamentally is, possible because of the digital technologies that we have. New business models, new services, new products that are, fundamentally digital alternatives. So that's the major change. The COVID-19 was a very disruptive event in many ways, and that means that truths that we know them were challenged. We had to do things differently, and in those situations, people become quite creative, and quite often the solution had to do something with digital technologies. But in many cases, what we tried to do during COVID was to do exactly the same thing as we did before COVID, but now in a digital way. So we were having our meetings, but we were now having Zoom meetings. And similarly, almost every aspect that we were doing was sort of a one-to-one application of digital technologies to do activities exactly the same way. So that led, someone said, so COVID meant a 5-year or 10-year jump into the future. And we can see that, how we were, e-commerce, for example, the increase in how we were buying stuff, where perhaps tenfold. But that's, I guess, in a sense, the simple aspect of that you apply digital technologies to do exactly the same thing as you did before. But the real power, and why we really care about digital technologies, is that they allows us to do things differently. They allows things, other ways of working. That wasn't exactly mimicking sort of the physical ways of working. And different products, that wasn't just same products, but with a digital feature. So on one hand, we were taking a leap into the future by digitizing and just replacing like for like. But on the other hand, we created a massive potential to do things differently. Because normally this goes in two cycles. On one hand, you do things digitally that you did physically, and then you figure out exactly how you can do things differently. For example, there's known example of you digitize your supply chain, you enable supply chains, and then you figure out that, now that we have everything online, we don't need the same, organizing our warehouses in the same way. We don't need to have local presence in the same way. We don't need to have some distributors. Maybe we can cut out the middle manager, or middle freight forwarder, or some step in the process. And that's sort of the second cycle. And I think there is where we are now, that we use technologies to digitize like for like, and created a massive potential to actually do things differently now that we're starting to understand the technologies we have in place and what they actually allow us to do. So for MBA students, I would say that there are 3 reasons why you need to understand digital technology. So one thing is simply because everyone speaks about it, right? If you go to a company and they look for new ways or new innovations or ways to grow in the business, there will always be a sort of a digital component of that. So just being able to take part of that conversation, you need to understand what digitalization is, what the technologies are. So it's like a purely conversational piece to be able to sort of grow the company or elaborate on the company. The second thing is that, so yeah, this is a bit of a hype, still a bit of a hype around it, but there are also substance, right? So it is actually, there is a reason why we talk about this, because if we want to do things differently in our go-to-market strategy, if we want to meet the customers differently, if we want to understand our customers differently, if we want to increase efficiency or productivity in our manufacturing, then we need to apply digital technologies. So getting the abilities to harness this different technology that comes up and see the patterns by which they change things across different type technologies is the second reason, because there is really substance. I mean, when we look at efficiency and productivity and increased sales, there are material capacities. And then the third reason, which is not to be ignored, and saying, okay, so if there are any capacities where companies today are lacking capacity, looking for people, it is people who have this profound digital knowledge. So when you go out in the job market, if you have a digital knowledge, if you have knowledge about digitalization, how it can be used to transform a company, well, then you're special. Because there's despite we have seen major layoffs in the tech sector, there's still a huge demand for this, right? And maybe some of the tech companies has reduced their workforce, but in the non-tech sector, and we got the normal companies that actually constitute the major of the economy, they are recruiting just as much, and they need digital competences. So there's no better way of making yourself attractive on the job market than acquiring digital competences. That makes you stand out, and that's a boost for your career. So this would be the third reason why you need to study digitalization. So at CBS, we have, on one hand, we have mandatory courses in digitalization, and that's always tuned to sort of exploring what are the key technologies at the moment, and how are they changing work practices. And then we have a optional concentration in digitalization, which is sort of you can get a digitalization profile, which consists of 4 building blocks. We call them elements, right? But it's 4 modules. And yeah, sure, they change a little bit to reflect what is relevant in the business. We really, if you work in digitalization, you really have to make sure that you're always tuned to what's going on in the world. But as for now, right, we speak about platform markets, platform economies. What are the different roles in those industries? How do they change the sort of the relationship between actors and tear down structures in marketplaces where we have platform entries? We speak about AI, right? There's no way around AI at the moment and how it can be applied in different contexts. We're trying to see it, okay, so not just super fascinated by this latest technology, but looking at something that is a little bit more sort of persistent, that we can understand in the longer term, that's all relevant in 5 years from now, and so patterns around how AI can be used in organizations, what are the capacities and capabilities that people need to acquire to effectively use AI. And then we speak, also about how does this transform innovation practices, which is one of our modules, and how do you actually take a holistic end-to-end perspective on your technologies that you have. Start all the way from the legacy ERP systems that have been around since the 70s to the cool applications on AI, and how do you manage them holistically to have a coherent technology strategy. When we speak about trend in digitalization, the trend at the moment is AI. And I think for us that stands in it, it's both terrifying and fascinating, because there is so much potential in it, right? There are short term, you can see this task can be solved so much faster or so much better for that sake. But there's also, all these difficult questions about, okay, so what is the bias there? How can I rely on it? What happens if I start to conduct a business that relies on some of the results that points out, right? What happens if we try to apply this in airport security, for example, right? What will the results be? And then there are, the very long term, like complications of this, including ethical considerations. So they're so multifaceted as a topic, and that there's something to really look into. But the other important aspect of this is that, okay, so we care about AI now, where it's so topical, is because there have been a major leap in the development. It took a couple of years, right? But when it surfaced, it had very dramatic effects. A couple of years ago, for example, we would talk about voice assistant, right? Siri, Alexa, and so on, because they had taken a leap and suddenly something else was possible. And a really, really dramatic effect with digital technologies is that they interact with each other. So when there is a leap in AI, now we're looking at keeping an eye, what are the other trends with which they will interact? So for example, voice assistants. Now imagine the power of AI if this is not a chat window, but actually like present as a conversational thing when you're driving your car, right? And how it can be used there. And also we see, quite recently, Apple is moving into the virtual reality, mixed reality, augmented reality space, whatever you call it, right? Imagine that now interacting with AI, right? With voice assistants, and also with more basic technologies like 5G networks that allows real-time data provisions in these headsets. So, these trends are sort of interconnected and building on each other. And when you see the one leap now in AI, right, soon we're going to see one leap in another technologies, and some of the most powerful use cases really comes from bridging these trends. So AI is important in its own right, but it's also really important to keep an eye on, okay, what is it going to interact with to make the next step? The long-term prospect, right, and about AI, we're still writing that chapter, and I would say that it's not given which direction we'll take, right? We still have some agency in this. We still have some way to influence this. We can hopefully make all technologies work to our good. But I think it's also really important to recognize that, I say, okay, the use of technology right now, it takes the form of AI, but there is some pattern to it. And we're trying to understand those patterns more holistically in long term. And I think for a while, right, historically it's been so that, okay, so when technology comes and makes things more efficient, right, we lose some jobs, but we create other jobs. And so there's been a sort of balance here. I think what we've seen for the last decade or so, unfortunately, is that there hasn't been a good balance, right? So we have reduced the number of jobs when we have made things more efficiently. Previously other technologies and now through AI. And the creation of new jobs hasn't been necessarily matching that, right? So maybe this is more of a pendulum swings, right? And we can see the long-term pattern. But it's a trend that we certainly need to consider. And there are things to work with this, right? At least in the midterm, short term. Why do we need to work 8 hours, 10 hours a day, right? Maybe AI is the breakthrough that finally will give us 6-hour work days or four days work weeks instead. It can go in that direction, right? Which is much more inspiring to think of rather than, right, all your friends or maybe yourself, right? Education is now not foreign to these trends as well, right? It's challenges as well. So, but I think that I mean, yeah, the numbers I've seen, and people might disagree, right? Because this is not as always clear to measure. But the thing is that this is part of a longer trend where the efficiency gains by applying digital tech has not been matched by the new job creation. And of course, that's a worry, right? That's but it's also part of a concentration on education, digitalization, to try to understand those, right? In terms of societal impact, about legal implications, the need to put it in legal frameworks to steer this in a good direction, right? And that's, in that sense, it's not unusual, because I mean, in most countries for quite a long time, where we think of a free job market, but there are still constraints. There's still things that we do in order to sort of create balances and avoid exploitations, right? And now we need to probably move in harder on the digital side to make sure that these technologies are used for its good, but not at the expense of damaging the society.